Hello.
Hey, Brian.
Forgot I had this little cover-up deal on my just a piece of paper. There we go.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I was just listening to Keith's session about coaching Valorant, and man, he looks like an expert for sure.
Yeah.
You play that game much?
I did when it first came out. I haven't in a while.
Okay. Yeah, it looks like a lot goes into it, but pretty cool to listen to. I mean, as a non-gamer, everything blows my mind.
Yeah. I'm going to try and share my screen real quick just to make sure that works.
Try what?
I'm going to try and share my screen to make sure it works.
Huh. I wonder if your connection's a bit slow or something. You were cutting out there, getting a little fuzzy.
Okay. Fix that as much as I can here. I hope that doesn't continue to be an issue.
Yeah, and when it was happening, I saw some signal bars next to your little thumbnail picture.
Sure.
So I don't know if it was telling me that it was low, but now it's good. But I don't know.
I'm going to go through and disconnect all of my Wi-Fi devices that I don't need on right now.
Sounds good. I see Jared just popped in here. I think Jared is the one we listened to at noon. Jared, if you can hear me, I thought that was an awesome presentation. Oh, now he just popped out.
Okay. All right. The only thing that should be connected to my Wi-Fi is my laptop now.
All right.
Hey, Mary. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, I'm a little worried. A lot of the sessions go till 2:15, so we might have some late incomers, but I think we'll be fine.
Sure. Yeah, we can definitely just kind of hang out and let people filter in for another 5 minutes, and then maybe start if people have questions, and just kind of see what happens. I'm flexible and free till the end of the day, so
Okay.
we can definitely take our time if we need it.
And I do see that eyeball symbol has a 4 next to it, so it looks like 4 people are watching, but there's only 3 of us here, so I don't know how accurate that is.
I think it takes a second to refresh, or like the people tab takes a second to catch up.
Sounds good.
I am multi-conferencing today, so just listening. Sorry. No worries, Mary. Thanks for being here and checking us out. I hope it's a valuable session for you. And we love everybody that participates, even if it's just listening. So I'm just going to throw in here, welcome, everyone.
Yeah, I did that networking button on the left there today. I didn't even try it yesterday, which is I regret because I got to chat one-on-one with 3 or 4 different people,
Awesome.
and yeah, that was pretty cool. A lot
Very
more
cool.
interactive than just talking to yourself on a computer and then
Yeah, just sitting at the screen.
yeah.
I wonder if does this get too bright? There we go. Yeah, so we'll just hang out until about 2:05, then kind of just see who all is in here. It looks like most of the sessions go until about quarter after, so we'll get rolling here shortly.
Yeah, one of the sessions I was watching just ended, so hopefully those guys shuffle over. And then Keith is still talking on his coaching Valorant one, and there's about
Sure.
6 people watching that one. So
Awesome. Oh, you know what? I bet it's counting my screen share as a person.
oh yeah.
Brian, do you know how long our session lasts until?
Yeah, I had it up in front of me here.
Just so I know.
It says 2 to 3, but
Okay.
starting at 2:15 until 3 o'clock is another networking time. So, if it doesn't go till 3, that's totally fine. And maybe I'll pop into that networking thing towards the end of
Sure.
our session as well.
Sounds good. Yeah, just kind of thinking about how fast I need to buzz through things. I've done this same presentation in about 20 minutes and I've done it in about an hour. So I can adjust as necessary, but it's just kind of good to know how much time we have allocated.
Yeah, it might be a little different without people right in front of you that can quickly talk back and forth. That would probably extend the time, compared to
Right. Yep. Yep. So. And we are recording, so no matter when we start, it looks like people will be able to see the whole thing. So that'll be good. Okay, now we're getting some extra people, or it says 5 in here now, so we might be.
Oh yeah, Brad, nice to meet
Checking
you.
up. Hey, Brad, thanks for joining. We're just kind of hanging out for a couple minutes until it looks like most of the sessions go until 2:15. So we're gonna let some more people jump in if they can, and then we'll get started here in just a couple minutes. So thanks for joining us, though. Brian, you think probably start around 10 after?
Yeah, that'd be good. Yeah.
And Mary and Brad, if you guys have any questions that you want answered beforehand, feel free to throw them in the Q&A. We'll have some time at the end for questions, but if you have things that right away you want to get answered before we get started here, feel free to throw those in the chat or the Q&A. And just give it another 2 minutes, and then we'll get rolling.
Sounds good.
Hey, Todd. Thanks for hopping in. We're just kind of waiting until 10 after to start so that we're not too far into the presentation. That way, people coming from the last hour session only miss the little intro bits.
Yeah, it looks like Keith is just wrapping up here too, so he's got about 6 people in his.
Awesome. Well, it's 10 after, so I think we could probably get going. And then, if people jump in halfway through or in 5 minutes when the last session's over, that's okay. I don't know, Brian, do you want to introduce yourself before I get going here?
Sure, yep. I'm Brian with Bytespeed. I've been with the company for 12, maybe 13 years, specifically in Illinois since 2017. And we sell all kinds of IT hardware and solutions. So I'll admit I'm not a hardcore gamer, but we've got a lot of gamers on our team at Bytespeed. Specifically, Josh Knutson here. We hired him as Esports and VR Solutions Director, and he's got a lot of great experience and a great team of gamer techs, on his team as well. So hopefully we have some good content for you, and we'll be around all day and tomorrow for any questions or one-on-one meetings. So I'll probably just turn off my camera and mic here and let Josh take it away.
Awesome. Thanks, Brian. And welcome everybody to our presentation on facility building. The do's, don'ts, and DIY. This is a topic that kind of every high school esports team, every college esports team needs to address at some point. So I've kind of broken down some of the key questions that get asked during this process of starting from scratch or starting from your ground level and kind of building up your space for your team. So just a little bit about me. Brian kind of already mentioned. I'm the Esports and VR Solutions Director for Bytespeed. I've been with the company for about almost 2.5 years now. I got started actually as the first former head coach and program director at the University of Jamestown up in North Dakota. We started that team and that program back in 2016. At the time, there was only around 20 varsity level college programs in the country, and I was lucky enough to be the one to help spearhead our efforts at Jamestown. And I learned a lot in the 3.5 years that I was at UJ, and a lot of that knowledge and a lot of that kind of, the things that I learned are stuff that I pass on in presentations like this all the time, and is kind of where a lot of the background knowledge, along with the work that we do at Bytespeed, where that comes from. One other quick fact about myself: I am a NACAT advisory board member. So that's the National Association of Collegiate Esports Coaches and Directors. Excuse me. And that's just a professional group. You can think of it like National Coaches Association for basketball or baseball, but it's for esports, and was formed about 2.5 years ago. Out of a necessity to help build up professional development for new coaches and directors. And it's an awesome group that I would highly encourage you to check into. They've got networking and sessions and professional development on their website that are great tools. And I actually have done a facilities presentation for that as well. If you're looking to connect after the conference, all of my contact info is on the screen here. Would love for you to give it a holler, either through phone, call, text, whatever. Send me an email. Would love to connect with you. Follow me on social media. I love hearing what people are up to, and if there's any way that we can help after the conference, please let us know. So that's enough about me. Everybody wants a cool esports room, right? This is a photo that we took. We had some professional photos done of our facility at Jamestown, the school that I coached at and we started. This is kind of one of those glamour shots of our facility that we took early on. But the room didn't always start out looking this awesome. It definitely didn't have all the bells and whistles. And there were some things that we had to do to get to that point. And hopefully, we can kind of talk through those starting points today, so that, in thinking about your blank canvas and your room that you want to build a facility in, we can kind of work towards an awesome space like this. So, I mentioned at the beginning that there are a couple of key questions that go into building out an esports space. And the first question is why? This isn't really necessarily, hey, nuts and bolts. This is the equipment you need. This is, what we're putting in this space. But it's absolutely important that in the beginning, why you're doing this in the first place. You want to have a purpose to why you're building out your space, and you don't want to rush into creating a program, creating a physical space on campus or at the school without a goal in mind of what you want to accomplish in that space. A lot of programs that take the time to set up their goals and define what they want to do often are more successful in implementing their programs in general. The longevity of their program is enhanced, and you want to collaborate with the administration, the coaches that are going to be involved, the teachers that are involved with the students, to come up with your why. So that's kind of like the do, don't, DIY for question number one is, have a purpose, don't rush in without one, and collaborate with the people at the school to come up with, why you're doing this in the first place. Some of the most common reasons why a school might be adding a program, student engagement is absolutely at the top of that list. Giving opportunities to participate for the students that might not have been involved in the school before. You'll have your athletes that do basketball and track and football, and the list goes on and on. You'll have your kids that participate in fine arts. They'll do band and choir and theater and all those other awesome programs. But then you might have a pool of students in the middle that doesn't really have something that they're interested in. doesn't have something at the school that they want to participate in. And esports for a lot of people can kind of fill that gap. At the collegiate level, recruitment, retention, those are big things. Also, if your high school has open enrollment, having an activity or a thing for those students to get involved with that other schools, in your area might not. That could be a draw for bringing enrollment in. Absolutely the social and emotional growth and the things that those students will be able to learn while being a part of that team. All of these are great reasons to add a program, and oftentimes schools will have a mix of a few of these to kind of get the best of everything and really kind of form their why. And like I said, programs without a clear goal often will struggle in their implementation. They might not have a program last for more than a year. We've unfortunately seen that in a couple of areas where things are rushed. They don't get the student engagement that they thought they might, and then a year or two after starting that program, the team's kind of defunct or a shell of what it used to be. So the first thing you want to do in setting up your facility is have a reason why, have a goal, have a plan, and work together with your teachers and admin to come up with that why. Question number 2 in kind of building out our facility is where. There are no right answers and there's no wrong answers to where you want to put an esports space in your school. Not every school is lucky enough to have extra classroom space to where they can just say, this is a dedicated esports room. That's all we're going to do. Sometimes we have to get creative. So what you're going to want to do for this question is collaborate with your IT department really early on. They're going to be instrumental in offering advice and also doing a lot of the legwork to get that space prepared depending on where it's going to be in the school. There are some schools that are able to take an existing computer lab and just kind of upgrade the hardware. There's not a lot of background work that has to go into actually prepping that space to get ready for the team. In other circumstances, it might be a blank classroom that doesn't have network drops. It doesn't have the power hookups that are required to have multiple devices in there. It might not have some of the things as like a core backbone of what you're going to build out for that space. But that doesn't mean it's not a good thing to consider. Don't overlook non-conventional spaces. We've worked with a number of schools that have done, spaces in their library or in a kind of a non-conventional academic space where, it used to be a shop room or, a cafeteria style in an old building or something like that. They've taken these spaces that, looking at them, you wouldn't think, oh yeah, that's a great spot for an esports program. But they've been able to work with, the facilities department, work with IT to really transform those spaces and build out an awesome facility where their teams can practice and live and feel good about it. One of the DIY things that I'd recommend in kind of looking at, these spaces is kind of sketch out a rough drawing of what you think that space will look like in the end. A lot of times those kind of renderings early on in the process can help with fundraising. They can help with, getting people on board as far as administration, convincing them that, hey, this is something that we want to add in our school. And they're a good thing that you can kind of pull together quickly and cheaply to be able to really help you in the long term. So what are the physical needs of a space? We talked a little bit about power and internet already, making sure that, you have network drops or you have the ability to plug into wired internet, which is super important. Oftentimes, and we'll talk more about infrastructure in a little bit, but a lot of times, your school's internet that you already have is going to be sufficient enough to, get your team off the ground. But having access to that internet in the form of a wired connection is something that you definitely want to work with IT to set up for the stations that are going to be in there. Power, having, enough outlets, enough circuits to be able to plug in all these devices, making sure that they're, if you have power strips that you can have, so they're surge protected, things like that. Accessibility is a big one. You're going to have students with disabilities that are actually able to participate in esports, and making sure that your room is able to cater to their needs is something that's super important. So you want to kind of have that in mind in kind of the needs and how you want to set up the space. Square footage, how much can we actually put into this room? That is definitely going to be a consideration and a thing that you need to look at. The typical kind of desk, the sweet spot as far as like, the amount of space per station that you should be looking at is about 3 to 4 feet. And I would strongly recommend, if you can get away with it, doing more towards the 4 feet per station. That's going to give you enough room side to side to where for some of the more active games, your players that are swinging their mouse arm, they don't feel crowded. They have room to actually be able to aim and to be able to move. You're not feeling like you're sitting on top of each other. That 4 feet number also lets you a lot of times be able to get the desktop on top of the desk, not have it on the floor or have to worry about getting extra stands or things to mount the desktop on. And then last kind of on this big checklist is HVAC and lighting. As somebody who started a program in a room that did not have working AC, I would strongly recommend that you take a look at that. Most machines nowadays are really power efficient. They don't throw a ton of heat, but when you get bodies in there, when you get 15, 20 devices all running, having some air is definitely going to be a beneficial thing, and something that you want to make sure is taken care of. Most of the time, it's not a big deal, but for colleges that are building spaces from scratch, definitely make sure that you're looking into that. And then lighting, I used to be a big fan of kind of that dark image that we saw in the beginning of, the lights off, LEDs everywhere, really making it that gamer arcade feel. I've kind of, I don't know if my opinions have changed, or I've just seen better spaces than what we had 5 years ago when I started. But I'm more of a fan now of, high ceilings, natural light if you can get away with it. Maybe not fluorescent lighting, but something that's dimmable, so that, you don't have bright lights shining, but you have light in the space, and your kids aren't straining to see, just on bright monitors. You want to make sure that their eye health is being taken care of. And then lastly, kind of as far as needs go, is it going to be a multi-purpose space? A lot of programs can get additional funding and additional use out of the machines that they're going to put into a space by partnering with another department on campus, or working with other extracurricular activities to be able to make those dollars go farther. One of the best ways that Bytespeed, we've seen schools get extra money, extra dollars for esports, is by pairing it with maybe an engineering class, Project Lead the Way, career and tech ed exploration, Adobe, some kind of a higher end lab like that. And being able to say, yes, during the day, this is going to be curriculum focused. We're going to use this space in the classroom. We're going to be doing work in here. And then at the end of the day, oh, by the way, the computers that we have are spec'd out and ready to run esports titles. And that way, not all of the burden is on just the esports team to be able to use that equipment to its fullest, and also, make sure that we can justify spending, thousands of dollars to outfit a room. Next up, question number 3 is what? This is the big one, right? What are we actually putting in our school? The do's and don'ts and DIY for this section, for do, absolutely visit and consult with other schools in the area and see what they did. Learn from, the schools in your state and the ones that have done this before you. Steal their best ideas and learn from the things that they think, oh yeah, we would have done this differently. The hard work's been done by a lot of other schools. So if you're just getting started, you've got a lot of groundwork in front of you to be able to say, I like that, I like this, and we can kind of make our space, what we need it to do. You don't have to overspend on equipment, and we'll talk about that in a second here. A lot about the wants versus needs conversation. A lot of people will get scared about the upfront cost of starting a program, but oftentimes you can do it on a budget or at a more needs-based than spending six figures on a room. And DIY, we're going to talk a little bit about decor and aesthetic. And I see that I have a spelling mistake on the screen, so ignore that. This word is supposed to be aesthetic, so apologies for that. But you can get creative with what you're putting in your space and how it looks and is decorated and the feel and the vibe that you're going for. So let's talk about needs versus wants. You want to be mindful of your budget. Schools have to spend every penny intentionally, make it stretch as far as it can, because a lot of schools, have budgets that only come up every once in a while, or they have smaller pockets of money to deal with. So the technology that they buy needs to last a long time. So be mindful of that budget and the space available, and try and reuse as much stuff as you can. One of the best ways to save money in building out a facility is to reuse old furniture to get started. We might have desks or tables that will work great to have a couple of monitors and computers on, or we might have chairs that are in pretty good shape and we can reuse until maybe year 2 or year 3 when we add gaming style furniture that's a little bit more ergonomic, a little bit more adjustable, things like that. Maybe it's reusing keyboards and mice that you've had from before, or finding ways to stretch your dollars farther. I like the analogy of a Ferrari is cool, and everybody wants a Ferrari, but will a Camry do? Will a Camry satisfy your needs? Will it get you from point A to point B while you look at some of the other priorities on that list? And speaking of priorities, what are the priorities in setting up your program? Infrastructure is going to be at the top of the list, because this is a digital sport and we need the internet to play. Unless you're doing something like a LAN Super Smash Brothers event or something that you can play on a local connection, you're going to need access to the internet. So that's got to be step number 1. Step number 2, PCs is probably going to be the lion's share of your budget. But that's, we got to have the internet before we can get the PCs connected. And then peripherals, furniture, and decor are kind of the things that will follow PCs. So let's talk about infrastructure real quick. What does your connection look like? From past experience and from firsthand experience, when we started the program at University of Jamestown, I had 15 machines on their own separate network. So we had a separate VLAN from the rest of campus. We were by ourselves, no traffic, from the dorms or from the academic buildings. It was just those 15 computers on that network. But it was only a 500 meg connection. So it wasn't anything super crazy. And for the first 2 years, that was all we needed. It was enough to get us by, and updates were kind of the thing that hamstrung us. And we'll talk about that in a second. But we didn't have to go overboard at first on the amount of internet connectivity that we had for that space. Most schools' internet connection that you have already will be definitely sufficient to get you started, and it might not be a thing that you have to worry about at all. There's a lot of schools that have gig, 10 gig, access, and there are definitely schools that don't. However, when esports happens during the day, a lot of times it's, after school, you don't have, 200-300 other devices walking around connected to the network. So you can a lot of times get away with what's already at the school. There might be things where in like year 2 or year 3, you can spend a little extra budget dollars to increase that connectivity, get a little bit more bandwidth. But to start, a lot of the times, schools will not have to worry about, bumping that up. Like I said, a separate network, if that's an option, that's absolutely going to be something that I would recommend. Being able to have a separate firewall set up, a separate connection to where, you're not worrying about the Chromebooks that are walking down the hall, or you're not worrying about, the accounting software that's running and other, office PCs that are accessing the internet. being able to be by yourself in a separate VLAN is awesome. Wired over Wi-Fi, I don't think I have to spend too much time on this. A wired connection is always going to be preferable. If you're not able to make that happen, Wi-Fi will still work, but I would highly encourage you, if you have the ability to get a wired Ethernet connection, that's what you should plan for and move towards if you can. It's going to give you a better connectivity. It's going to make the network more stable. It's going to make sure that you're not suffering some of the hiccups that come with playing on Wi-Fi. And finally, updates. This is where having that 500 gig connection, or that 500 meg connection that I was talking about, where we saw the biggest strain on our network was when we tried to run updates. A lot of esports titles get updated every week. It might be once a month. It might be 4 times in a day. It depends on what development looks like from the actual companies that are making the games. But you're going to have to push updates to computers at some point, and they're going to have to download that information to be able to run those updates and keep things able to actually play the games. One of the issues and why we chose to upgrade our internet in year 3 when I was at Jamestown was that when we were updating PCs, we had 24 at that time. We could only really update about 4 at a time before all of our bandwidth was sucked up. And we were seeing, if I tried to add that 5th computer trying to download things, it would just slow down to a crawl and it wasn't worth it. So that's something that you want to keep in mind. There are things that you could do, like a game cache server, or kind of just accessing more internet connection. That'll help alleviate some of the stress with updates, but that's definitely more of where the pain point will come from than just playing the game if you've got half decent internet to start with. So computers, the big one. Most esports titles are played on PC. There is a growing console network out there. Titles like Super Smash Brothers are only on a Nintendo Switch. So if your schools are doing those type of games, you'll have to look into consoles. But for the majority of esports stuff, it happens on PC, and that's kind of what we're going to talk about for the most part as far as equipment is concerned. The big question that we get asked all the time is, how many do I need to put into my facility? And really, that answer to that question is going to be a balance of a couple of things. And number one is, what titles are you playing, and what's the minimum required number of players to field the starting lineup? For Overwatch, for right now, it's 6. Overwatch 2 is going to be 5. League of Legends is 5. Smite is 5. Rocket League is 3. So your team size and the minimum number of devices will be dictated by what games you're playing. A lot of schools will take that minimum number and double it so that they can have 2 teams playing against each other in practice. 2 teams like a varsity and a JV practicing at the same time. So you might see something like 12 if we're running Overwatch, or 10 is a really common number to start with because League is so popular. Rocket League, we might be looking at 6 machines or 9 if we want to get 3 teams going at a time. And then kind of balancing out, what's that minimum? What are we looking at there? And then the number of students that you have, actually participating or interested in the program. You'll have, if I'm starting an esports team and I have 10 machines in my lab and I have 50 students that show up to practice on day 1, that's great for the 10 kids that are playing, but what do I do with the 40 others? Are they coming on a different day to practice? Are they coming at a different time to practice? Kind of just balancing out, what you want to do as far as the number of devices in that regard. Todd brings up a good point. I always suggest to go +1, so you have at least 1 coaching or streaming station. That is absolutely a great point to make. If you want to have, run in-house scrimmages and you want to stream that stuff, having a dedicated machine off to the side to run OBS and to connect to Twitch or YouTube and actually pump that stream out, it's a great thing to have that additional device to be able to do it. For Bytespeed, we work with schools across the country. We've helped with hundreds of schools get up and running. For esports, the average number of devices for K-12 is between 5 and 15 usually to start. Now, there are some schools that are going above that. But I would say, the average from what I see is between 5 and 15. College is usually between 10 and 20 to start. And then, in year 2, you can add more. In year 3, you can add more and then start refreshing devices. But that's just kind of the average that we see. As far as specs is concerned, most esports titles are pretty well optimized to play on lower grade hardware. Now, I'll say that with a caveat that, there are things that you want to do, make sure that you can run the bare minimum to run the game. And then also, balance out future proofing. How long does this device have to last? And then looking at, how much our budget do we have per device? What can we get away with? And, what are the important things that we want to do with these machines? If they're just going to be for esports, can we get away with doing a little lesser hardware? If we're going to stream or do, video production or how, more stuff in the background, maybe we need to do an upgraded spec. So as far as example builds go, I've got kind of the Bytespeed gold standard on the stream here. So entry-level devices, we typically will say, i5, Ryzen 5 3600, something that's a little more on the entry to mid-level side. For processor, usually good enough. Unless you're doing stuff like streaming or multitasking, the processor really doesn't have to be, i7, i9, those really high-end processors. For RAM, 16 gigs is kind of the gold standard. You could look at bumping that up to 32 if you're going to do stuff like streaming, like I said. But RAM is where a lot of those diminishing returns will happen for gaming performance. Once you get to above 16, you're getting marginal increases in performance. There's a big difference between 8 and 16. And so, the esports stuff that we recommend and that we do for Bytespeed and Gravity Gaming usually is just at 16, and that's kind of the sweet spot. For storage, we usually only see about 500 gigs of SSD storage. Making sure that it's an SSD, and not a mechanical spinning drive. You're going to be you're going to be able to access data faster. Your read-write speeds are going to be better with an SSD. Your load times are going to be better. Your assets are going to be, they're going to just overall perform better if you're on an SSD. That can be a 2.5-inch SATA plug. That could be an M.2 drive. Both of those we've seen, M.2 is definitely more popular just because of the performance gain, and actually the price difference is not that much nowadays. But a lot of schools have enough storage in that 500 gigs to be able to put their operating system and then the games that they're playing on a pretty consistent basis. You could bump that up to a terabyte or a couple of terabytes. If you're storing video or, you're doing a lot of production in that regard with maybe a streaming PC, maybe you want to add in a 2 terabyte mechanical drive or a hard drive and be able to store, more files and more data on, those cheaper, larger drives that don't need the performance on the gaming side. For graphics cards, 1660 Super is kind of the lowest that we would like to say is like the gold standard. It's a 6 gig card. It's going to be able to run almost every title, maybe not at like ultra settings, but it's going to be able to give you that competitive experience. It's going to be able to render things at the speed that you need it, give you the frame rates that you need to get started, and it won't break the bank. For heat sinks, fan cooling, water cooling is overrated unless you're really pushing your machine and you're really worried about temperatures. Usually just a standard fan configuration is more than adequate. We actually do a lot of AMD stock coolers, and that helps keep prices down because we're not adding an aftermarket cooler. But it's also performing at the rate that we need it to keep everything cool and the machine working in the way it should. And power supplies, usually for a lot of the builds, a 650 watt, bronze certified plus is going to be more than adequate for what you need and what you have in an esports build. Now, if we're kind of bumping things up to a mid-tier system, you'll see RAM, storage, power supply, all of that stuff is the same. We're maybe making an upgrade in the processor and the graphics card. That's where you're going to see the biggest gains, and actually the video card is 100% the most important thing if you're looking at bumping up performance and making your machine do more. Processors, like I said, if you're multitasking, streaming, things like that, that's kind of number 2 on the list of things that we would want to upgrade. And those mid-tier systems would be able to run the more taxing games at higher settings. But honestly, a lot of schools will start with an entry-level system, and they'll be good to go for years. The college team that I coached and ran, we bought this configuration on the left-hand side and ran it I'm still using it at home here as my daily driver at home as a desktop system that I play on, and that's 5 years later. So you don't have to break the bank. This is where that Ferrari versus Camry conversation really comes into play. You can push an entry-level system really well and get a lot of great performance out of it. It's going to run titles that you're seeing in high school and in college. And if you have the budget money, maybe we look at upping that graphics card or that processor and kind of bumping it up from an entry-level system to a mid-tier system. Next up, peripherals. You want to make sure that the things that we're adding to the PC setup are rated for esports. So that's for sure displays. You want something, the gold standard and kind of like the thing that you want to shoot for, 24 inches for a monitor size. You don't really need anything bigger than that. The refresh rate and the response time, so 144 hertz, and then like a millisecond, half a millisecond response time. Those are things that you want to look for in a monitor. You don't need to go curved. You don't need to go massive. A lot of it is a lot of those larger displays or the fancier displays. You're paying for frills, whereas you could maybe spend that extra money on more devices or upgrades in either your PC overall or better other peripherals. So keyboard and mice, the other peripherals, you want to make sure that you're looking at mechanical keyboards and mice. They're going to be more responsive. You can customize the inputs. They're going to be more durable than like your standard, $5 Logitech mouse that you might have in like a generic computer lab when all you're doing is like word processing or things like that. So there's a lot of great options that are out there that won't break the bank. We work with HyperX and Logitech with their gaming stuff, and you can get a lot of really high quality peripherals in that $50, $60, $70 range. So they don't have to be $300 wireless removable switch keyboards. You can get away with something that has the performance and the build that you're looking for, but is also like I said, $70. And then headsets, make sure that it's over the ear. It helps with noise canceling. You want to be able to hear your teammates through that microphone when you're in Discord or an in-game chat or whatever you guys are using for that team communication. There's a lot of different headsets out there. The one that you see on the screen, that's a $55 headset. It doesn't have to be something crazy, big brand name, Sennheiser, noise canceling, $400 for a headset. You can get away with some awesome entry-level stuff that's going to do the job, and your students are going to have a good time using it, and it'll perform the way you need it to. Furniture, again, this is one of the things that I said is one of the easiest ways to save money, is using what you already have. The big things that you want to look for if you are getting new furniture is adjustability, durability, and then comfort. A lot of esports racing style chairs have adjustable armrests. They have lumbar support, neck pillows, things like that. Being able to be adjustable and have the weight capacity so that everybody that's part of your team can feel comfortable when they're sitting in that chair, that's going to be the biggest thing. You can get fancy if you have extra dollars in your budget to add, school colors or logos to desks and chairs. But a lot of times, if we check off that comfort, adjustable, and durable, those are kind of the big things for chairs. And then desks, you want it to be sturdy. You don't want it to be wobbling all over the place. and you want to have a lot of good usable space. That desk that we have on the screen here, it's $160. It is 4 screws to put it together. They are rock solid, but there's not a lot of frills to it. You see 2 little cable grommets that you can fish cables through and then maybe tie it down to the bar underneath, but it's not super flashy. It doesn't have LEDs all over it. But it's got a lot of usable space. We can set a desktop up there. We've got that 3 to 4 feet that we're talking about as far as space for your players to feel comfortable. It's deep enough to where a monitor can either be on a mount or just sit on top of that desk. And that's kind of what I look for, when I'm recommending furniture to schools. And then, are you going to put other furniture in your facility? There are some programs out there that'll have couches for VOD review, or, they'll have comfortable, flexible seating for spectators that want to come in if they have a stage in their arena or something like that. All of those things are awesome to have, but they're not requirements. But that, it will add to your overall budget if we're, deciding to put that stuff in our facility. And then finally, kind of decor and aesthetic, don't be afraid to get creative with what you are doing as far as lighting and artwork and stuff that's in the school. This is a great way to get more people involved with esports. If you talk to your art students or your art department and say, hey, we want a mural in our esports facility, could you guys do that for us? If you have a photography club or other groups on campus that are going to be able to help add to that space, but it's stuff that they can do in school. Maybe it's something that they can even do for a grade. Great low budget ways to add to your space and really kind of tie everything together. Now, before I get too far, I did notice that Carl said a couple of seconds ago, found that a lot of my players preferred to even bring their own keyboard, mice, and mouse pads. That's definitely absolutely a thing that we see all over the place. Keyboards and mice are a lot like shoes for other sports. Everybody's kind of got, the one that fits their feet the best, or the one that they prefer to run in or walk in. And same thing with mice. I might have something that fits a little bit, smaller in my hand, or might be a little heavier or lighter. A lot of different variations. A lot of schools will provide kind of like an entry level, kind of low budget option for the kids that don't have that stuff to be able to bring from home. But that is true. A lot of players will want to bring their own. Getting back to decor and aesthetics and stuff, Kyle mentioned that there's so much good game art online that you can either print and laminate that can look really classy. They put like a big 17 by 11 big laminator in the school this year, and it was awesome. And that's absolutely something that you can do. There's a ton of ways to get creative with this, and I would just say don't overlook, adding some creative lighting. Maybe it's getting a vinyl cutout of your school logo and getting it on the wall. Or maybe it's just, printing out some cool posters or ordering some things off of Amazon or something like that. There are ways that you can kind of tie your space together and really bring it all in. Let's see. And then, again, just DIY as much as you can. Okay, big question here. And the last question that we're going to talk about is how. We've talked about a lot of cool stuff. The dollar signs are starting to add up, I'm sure, in your brain. So how do we actually go about getting this facility all together now that we know where it's going to be, why it's going to be there, and what we need to put in it? Be an informed consumer. Talk to your vendor partners. Talk to your IT department. Look at what they're talking with companies like Bytespeed about what their options are and what do you actually need. Kind of going back to that needs versus wants conversation. Don't let the upfront costs scare you. A lot of people will see, this big dollar amount to get started. But the good thing about esports is after you have that big upfront cost paid for, your operating costs from year to year are going to be a fraction of that first year. If we're buying 15 computers, say in year one, those are going to last me 3, 4, 5 years, and I'm not going to need to make that purchase again in year two. So now all of a sudden I have all that budget money freed up for other things. It's a digital sport. We can play 45, 50 games a year right from our own school. So we're not paying for bus drivers. We're not paying for meals. We're not paying for officials. You might have a league fee or jerseys or stuff like that. But those are going to be smaller costs every year that you're not going to see that big price tag, after you've got things set up. And DIY fundraise, and we'll talk about that in a second here. Budgeting for esports, it doesn't matter where that budget's coming from. It could be student life, it could be athletics, it could be underwater basket weaving. If you can bring a couple of groups together on campus that can use that space where the students are going to be able to utilize it and pull them together, you can pool more pots of money together and split that cost. And it's a great way to, like I said, use those machines for multi-purpose stuff, curriculum during the day, esports at night, etc. There are a ton of grant resources out there. I've got a link on the screen. If you go to bitespeed.com/resources/funding, you'll see a big list of about 60 to 70 grants out there for education. It might be Project Lead the Way grants, Carl Perkins grants for career and tech ed exploration. It might be local, state, and government grants like that. But there's a ton of funding out there that might not come from your school. You might have to go out and apply for it or access it in a different way. But there is dollars out there for schools if you don't have everything that you need right in the school's budget. There's other stuff that you can do to fundraise, different groups out there. I would recommend looking into eTeam Sponsor. They're a crowdfunding platform that traditional athletics has been using for years. I ran college track and cross country, and we did an eTeam Sponsor fundraiser every single year. And it was just a way to pool, ask, 5 friends for $5 and then, getting crowdfunding towards a larger goal. Bake sales and raffles. There's actually, I think, the coolest fundraiser I've ever seen right there in the state of Illinois, Sandoval High School. They created an arcade cabinet. I don't know if Marvin's here, but they did an arcade cabinet in a computer science class during the year, built that out. That was the school's project. And then they actually did a fundraiser. They sold raffle tickets for that arcade cabinet. It just had like a Raspberry Pi in it. The students helped program it and get everything working. But that was a big fundraiser for them. And they actually used the proceeds from that raffle to help fund esports for the next year. So you can get really creative. You can do all that kind of stuff. And then you can also, look at sponsorships and partnerships. I would say, if you have active booster clubs in your communities, going to, the parents and the businesses that have students at the school, asking them for small chunks of money. I think a lot of times people are more apt to give when it's, hey, would you sponsor one station? So we're going to Paul's Hardware and saying, hey, I have a $1,500 setup that I need to get for, keyboards, mice, all that good stuff. Would you consider donating, and we'll put your name on that station, rather than going to, Paul's Hardware and saying, hey, I need 60 grand. Would you want to just donate that and you'll be the big sponsor for the whole room? I think it's an easier way to get people to donate and to be a sponsor or partner of your program if you're talking about smaller chunks. And then finally, I just have a couple of photos to end here of some spaces that we've worked on and helped set up. This is what I had at Jamestown, in the lair that we set up. We called it the lair because it was in the basement of the library. You had to, go downstairs this creepy hallway, and it was dark. And at the end of the hallway, we have this nice, awesome room. So this is where Jamestown lived for the first 5 years of their program. They're moving buildings this year to a larger space because we've outgrown it. So they have about 40 computers now and right around 60 student athletes, I think. And this was the humble beginnings of the Jamestown Esports program. So we had, desks that lined the outside of the space, and then this small center table that we had 5 computers on. And that was when, we had games. All those computers were connected to a streaming machine. Had a couple of TVs hung up on the walls, some whiteboards for game planning and assignments for each players that I wrote out. But this was our home when I was at UJ. The next couple of spaces are a couple of high schools. We did a big road trip at the beginning of June out to Ohio to kind of visit some of the deployments that we had set up. So these are high schools that have gotten programs started over the last couple of years, and we've helped out with all of them except one, I think. Mad River here on the side, they did the expensive desks and chairs, and they got a nice classroom space built out. We worked with the Jewish Community Center in Youngstown. That's the top right-hand corner. Same kind of style. They've got a couple of leather couches for some console games, and then have, just folding tables and their setups kind of on the outside. Cary Village High School on the bottom right, they're in an IT room that was converted. And they've got, classroom desks that they've kind of arranged to be able to get stations all hooked up and put on. They've got network drops coming from the ceiling. Another 2 schools that we've worked with, Colonel Crawford Public Schools, that's in their media center and their library. It's a big kind of horseshoe shape with some desks in the middle. So they've got stuff lining the room and kind of all around, but they're just on, regular tables that they have. And they've got really, just the chairs that they had in the library at the time. And then Bluffton High School is cool because they're doing small form factor Extreme NUC computers in a classroom that they've outfitted. Again, it's just very basic furniture, but they've got high-end monitors, good mechanical keyboards and mice. They've got the small form factor NUC PCs that are running some pretty great hardware. So you can see a lot of different shapes and sizes and what these labs can look like and what facilities can look like. And then the last one that I want to show you is a professional esports org. The 100 Thieves, they're a professional organization based in California. They have a $16 million building called the Cash App Compound. And this is one of the rooms that they have set up for their professional players. And if you notice on the wall, they have some signage. They've got some couch seating. But then, they've got just PCs on a shelf jutting out from the wall and some nice gaming chairs. But really, what's the difference between this space and some of the high school spaces? Not a lot. So you can build a really awesome program and be set up like college programs, like professional esports organizations, because at the end of the day, we're building out a lab for our kids to be able to come in, participate, and have an awesome time, and open up those doors and those opportunities. And really, the difference between this space and these spaces is not that much. So that's all I got as far as the presentation is concerned. I would love if anybody has questions, if they want to dump those down in the space or in the chat or in the Q&A function here. But I just want to say on behalf of Bytespeed and Brian and I, thank you so much for jumping in and joining us this afternoon. Thanks for supporting the IHSEA and the summer conference. It's been awesome to be a part of it. We're humbled that we get to be a sponsor and that we get to be active and be a resource for you guys in the schools in Illinois. And please reach out if you need any help. Brian and I would love to sit down and talk with you, answer any questions that you have that we maybe didn't get to today. And just be there for you guys as you move into the fall semester.
Thank you, Josh. I had to step out for about 20 minutes there. I ended up talking about deer hunting with Jared for a solid 20 minutes. And he said right away, it's pretty rare. We got a couple gamers and we're also deer hunters. So I was worried about the dead animal on my wall, but he enjoyed it. So maybe we'll chat with Jared one-on-one afterwards. But yes, thank you everyone for joining, and you know where to find us if you want to have a follow-up conversation.
Thanks so much, everybody. That's all we got. Feel free to hit us up. We'll be in the booth tomorrow in the afternoon. I think there's some dedicated time But then you can always reach out, schedule a meeting, message us through Hopin or through email. Maybe I'll just put my contact info up on screen here, just so that everybody has it if they want it. Yeah, like I said, thanks so much. Feel free to reach out if you need any more help, and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Josh, I don't know if you saw Jared's question there, just popped in the chat.
Yeah, do you guys run Discord? So I have a Discord account. I'm pretty active in the servers that I am in, but we don't run a Discord server necessarily of our own. I try and drop helpful stuff where I can, and I'm trying to get into like the statewide Discord, so that if there are opportunities for us to provide value and jump in there and post messages and stuff, we can, but we don't have one of our own necessarily.
I think we did at one point, right? Didn't
we did, and it just kind of really didn't take off. So it was one of Zach Broughton's things. One of our a former salesman of ours had set one up for some of our customers, and we had a couple of schools take advantage of it, but for the most part, it was they were jumping into their own high school ones, their own statewide ones. So we just didn't really have a ton of content in there. So
yeah. Well, maybe we sign off here, and anybody reaches out, Josh, I'll let you know if we want to set up a one-on-one call or anything.
Perfect.
Go from there.
That sounds good.